So the obligation to educate excluded students, we know that the Washington State Constitution has a very formidable and clear mandate to educate students. It says that it's the paramount duty of the state to make ample provisions or ample provision for education of all children residing within its borders. However, there's no specific state statute that discusses what obligations schools have to excluded students under those conditions. We know also that the legislature requires that schools offer around approximately 1,000 hours of instruction hours per year. We also know that the Washington Supreme Court has stated that the duty of the school to provide ample education provides a corresponding obligation for the children to take advantage of education offered by the state. That case wasn't specifically about excluded students under an outbreak, but it kind of gives you a little idea about one perspective on the education, how the Washington Supreme Court looks at it. Now, local schools can provide additional alternative education. There's nothing that stops them from providing excluded students, some kind of virtual classroom, or some examples that actually happen where, teachers and, giving homework and having homework delivered to students. They can expend funds to have alternative education programs, but there's nothing specific for under these conditions. Also, excluded students do have a few other options. Of course, they can get the vaccine and go to school immediately. If they do not, if they get excluded for a very long period of time and end up falling behind, the law allows students to stay in school up until 21 to make up those credits. And they obviously can also be homeschooled if that's what the parent desires. So in conclusion, schools are responsible for educating students. They're specifically responsible for offering the education, but the exclusion order does come from the local health officer. Has nothing to do with the authority of the school. As Mr. Lamb mentioned, the city is not directly involved in that process with school policy and so forth. But it may be advisable for the legislature to maybe address this and think about the future, especially considering that the length of time that some of these outbreaks can cause students to be excluded and the impact it can have on their education.
One of the other options that you bring up is that the student can remain in school until the age of 21. That is some option there. My gosh, I wouldn't be happy about that.
No, for sure.
And what about, have you looked into the issue of the shedding of the disease once the vaccine is placed into the child's body?
No.
Okay, so that's another concern that we should definitely be aware of.
I've seen statistics that some of the children who got mumps in Spokane County schools, where some of them actually had the vaccine previously. Okay. So I do know that fact.
With the outbreak that we had here, there was 10 unvaccinated statewide that got the mumps. I believe the final numbers were, and 500 and something, I think it was, in the Spokane area that were vaccinated that had mumps. So what they were trying to do didn't work, and hopefully we'll have a better fix for that. But I appreciate you guys putting this together. The only other thing I had is on these obligation to educate excluded students, you put the exclusion that after the Washington State Constitution that, however, no specific state statute governing education of excluded unvaccinated students. I don't know why that would even be a rider, because an excluded student is still a student. So
true, and I guess what we meant there was the requirement for schools to provide some alternative program to kids that are no longer attending the school physically during that period of time. There's just nothing specific to that. I agree, they're still students and they still should be educated and have that education offered to them. My understanding from the recent outbreak was the magnitude sort of caught everyone unaware, and they just didn't have programs in place to assist the families and the kids. And the length of time is such a significant time. It's a major impact. And, you know, you miss a month of school, and that is a lot of time away. Hard to make that up and catch up in a year of school, especially when it occurs in the winter, like it did here, where you only have a couple months to try to make it up. So, you know, just because legally they can attend till 21, that doesn't make it practical, you know, if you're trying to squeeze in extra schooling. So we haven't reached out to the districts, but I hope that they're working on some solutions in the event it happens in the future as well.